Hello everyone! I wanted to show and talk about my latest acquisition, an Apple III computer. While many people are familiar with the Apple II line and then the subsequent Macintosh series, this machine was one of Apple's rare flops. The Apple III was first released in 1980. It was notorious for having many technical problems which ultimately led to its early demise and discontinuation by Apple around 1984. The computer was released as the more professional and business-like successor to the Apple II. It was very expensive at the time, with some configurations costing upwards of $14,000 in today's money. The high price and reputation for unreliability resulted in at most 70,000 machines being sold. This has resulted in it being somewhat hard to find in 2017. The machine I got comes with everything seen here. There is the main CPU, which includes the keyboard and floppy drive. Next is the Monitor 3, which sits perfectly on top of the computer. And to the right is the external Apple III floppy drive. Many Apple III computers were configured with a profile 5 MB hard drive. While my computer has this interface card installed to support the drive, the machine did not come with the drive. Unfortunately, a capacitor inside the computer popped literally minutes after I powered it on for the first time. It was working long enough for me to see the RAM diagnostics, which were reporting bad RAM chips. This is revealed on a grid of dots with inverse ones representing the bad memory chips. I didn't get a video or even a picture of this, but here's one I found online. From my recollection, the machine was reporting about 5 to 10 bad RAM chips. You'll notice on the back of the computer, it looks like it's one giant heatsink. This is because the Apple III used an innovative all-aluminum chassis for the time. While the top cover is plastic, the rest of the computer is solid aluminum. Looking at the arrangement of ports here, for 1980 this was quite interesting. You had built-in floppy disk controller, 2 joystick ports, and you had a color video RGB port. This uses TTL video and I assume is compatible with CGA style monitors. There's also a composite output, an audio output jack, and an RS-323C jack. Over here in this section is the built-in power supply. The computer has a really nice keyboard, with a very solid feel to it. A couple interesting things is there's no backspace key, it's just a backslash key where it would normally be. Also, the arrow keys have a very interesting feature to them. The arrow keys on the Apple III are actually velocity sensitive. So while they kind of feel a little bit different when you don't make the same click noise, if you push down on them, that starts moving the cursor at a normal speed. But if you push harder, there's actually an additional click, and it has 2 levels of speed. All of them are like that. You can hear the extra click. It's a lot like the shutter button on a camera. You push down part way to focus, and then you push the rest of the way past the click, and that actually takes the picture. And what is caps lock is actually labeled alpha lock. To remove the top cover on the Apple III, you simply loosen 2 screws on the bottom here. These are captive screws so they don't fall out. And then you just lift up on the front. Now you can really get a good look at the solid aluminum chassis. Everything that's painted this dark brown here is solid metal. So inside this section here is the power supply, and down below under this is the motherboard, which extends all the way down and under the keyboard. You can see these holes here on this chassis. This is to allow airflow into the case so that the heat can rise. This machine has absolutely no fans, and Apple later added these as a way to try to fight the overheating problems that these computers had. Here you get a glimpse down into the chassis. You can see there's 4 expansion slots, and then there's some other support chips down here. There's not too much revealed when you look through here. It's just enough room to plug the cards in. Now this computer was more than just an Apple II in a fancy case. It actually had a 2 MHz 6502. It had some other notable features as well, like a definable character set, up to 512K of RAM with up to 256K possible on the stock Apple RAM board. Think about that. This computer came out in 1980. That was a lot of memory. It also has 16 color graphics and text with the TTL RGB video output, which I pointed out below. It also can output color on the composite video output. It also has a 1-channel audio DAC, so essentially can actually produce tones more than just simple beeps. It also has limited Apple II emulation. To do it, you have to boot a floppy disk and then give it a try. I've heard that this doesn't work very well though. This Apple III came with 2 additional cards installed. The first one here is the Apple III Universal Parallel Interface. Copyright 1980 Apple computer. Looking here it says Universal Parallel Printer Interface. The connector here seems to have little blocks that allow you to add extra pins. I'm not sure what the deal is with those. While looking through this hole here, you might think there are dip switches on this board, but it's actually just these resistors here. The next card that's installed was this Apple III Profile I/O card. This is what allows you to connect the 5 megabyte hard drive to the computer. I flipped the computer over here, and you can see that the motherboard and the power supply are both accessed from the bottom side. The motherboard is attached to this metal plate here, so you just remove all of the screws and then you can lift it out. The power supply works exactly the same way. There's no way to access either of these components through the top of the case. By looking at my serial number, you can see this is the 19,138th computer made. And from my research, I found that the computers with the low serial numbers, like especially in this range, are using the very rare and hard to find 12-volt memory. Other thing is weird is this thing has 3 check marks possible here for 64, 96, or 128K for the RAM configuration, but none of those are checked. Since a capacitor on the power supply blew out, that's the first thing I need to tackle to see if I can get this computer powered on again. Here's my Apple III power supply. It seems like what happened is this 0.22 microfarad capacitor gave out. It's an X capacitor, so means it's across the mains as like a filter suppression. And it stinks really bad. I think, what are these called? Thin film capacitors. I have another capacitor on the way, but right now I want to test the machine, so I'm just going to remove this. It shouldn't be necessary for operation of the computer. Well, there's the culprit. That's the reason for that stinky smell that this thing shot all over my workbench. Obviously this is a fancy capacitor, German or Swiss brand or something like that, but it is old. 0.22x. So I ordered a new 0.22x2 capacitor, and that should be here in a couple days. Luckily it didn't seem to cause any damage here. I got it pretty quick. It did shoot towards this little transformer, or this choke, so I'll just clean this up a little bit. There's another 0.1 over here, so that should be changed, although this is on the low voltage sides. And of course there's these all these radial electrolytics here. Guess I should get busy and order stuff and start replacing things on this Aztec power supply. I want this computer to last a long time. I don't want this power supply to be the reason for a failure. Normally the power supply sits in this cavity here. It's funny, it's a huge cavity for some reason. Even though this is the power supply, and you can see it doesn't have a lot of height to it, so when it sits in here like that, it's a bit strange that they gave so much room for it. Anyhow, so under this plate here is the motherboard, and it's attached to the plate so you can lift this out from the bottom. I was worried about this because essentially Apple III's, as far as I understood, had very weird, non-standard 12-volt RAM chips. And especially the early models with serial numbers kind of under 50,000 or under 30,000, or I can't really make heads or tails of it, but these low numbers generally mean you have this 12-volt RAM. The chips are available. I found some on eBay of the 12-volt type, but they're very expensive at over $8 a piece. And of course, they are very rare and weird, so if you have failures in the future, once the supply of those sort of runs out, it'll be really hard to find the chips. I have a printout of the entire service manual for the Apple III. If you look here, this section here talks about the memory board. There's the 12-volt memory board here with 128K. So you have 3 rows of chips. With the correct main logic board configuration, this board can have up to 128K without modification. The latest memory board is called the 5-volt memory board. This board illustrated in the accompanying page can be configured with 128 or 256K of RAM. The 5-volt memory board, however, requires the current main logic board configuration, or the correct. And that's what it looks like. So you get 2 rows of chips, and I don't really know why they look different. There are 2 different memory boards. These are the ones from the much later machines from what I've read, and they use standard RAM chips that are pretty common all across the board. Alright, so I have all the screws taken out, so let's reveal the motherboard. It kind of flips out like this. This is the power supply connection. Okay, here we go. Here's the RAM board, and it's definitely a 2-row RAM configuration, and it says 5-volt memory right on there. So that's really great. That makes me feel a lot better. That means that now I can actually start looking for replacement RAM chips, or actually just reseat them to see if they are bad. I just wanted to see what was going on with the RAM first of all. So I'm going to take this board off and just take a closer look at it. Alright, so I had the motherboard out and I took the RAM board off, And then I used some Deoxit, which also has some lubricant, to get it back on and off a few times, make sure the contacts were clean. It was very difficult to get off. It was like it was fused onto there. So I took it off, deoxed the connector pins that connect the motherboard and the RAM board together, put it back on. I also pushed every single RAM chip just down with my thumb. I didn't take them out of the sockets and put them back in. When I turn this on, see what happens. Wow, success. I had a whole bunch of inverse ones there, which represented bad RAM chips. Now that looks good, I hope. And then if I push reset, it attempts to boot. But I don't have a floppy disk yet, so it's just going to say retry. I need to download a boot disk, Apple Sauce, sophisticated operating system. Now the RAM chips that are on the 5-volt board are the HM486P-3. Anyhow, looking on eBay here, I see some sellers selling new ones and they're kind of expensive. But here's a seller selling 8 of them for $6 plus $2.50 shipping. So for $7.50 you get 8 chips. But I'm tempted just to order a couple of these, maybe 16 chips, just in case any of the chips on my Apple III do fail in the future, and I'll just have these in reserve. Okay, so I have my Apple III back together, enough to do some more testing. I've made some floppy disks using ADT Pro on my Apple IIe, and let's give this a test. Okay, so here's the RAM diagnostic. We're still looking good. Now the computer is supposed to boot directly into the floppy drive and not go to diagnostics, but I've done some research and it seems like there might be a problem with the keyboard. Specifically, the power light on the keyboard is not working, which can cause it to go directly to diagnostics. But all you have to do is push Control and reset and it boots up. So I have the Apple III Confidence disk installed. This is sort of a diagnostic and analysis program for the computer. So let's check out machine configuration. It's just checking things out.
I'm okay. Machine status normal.
All right, did you hear that voice? I'm okay, machine status normal. That's pretty cool. But a couple interesting things are appearing here. Memory map for 256K. It appears that this computer actually has more RAM than I thought in it. If we go down to memory test, I've let the memory test run for quite a while here, and there's absolutely no problems. All 256K check out perfectly, and extension RAM, whatever this is, 8F, I'm not sure. But this goes through several iterations. It's already on 2 passes right here, and there doesn't appear to be any problems. So pushing down the RAM chips and reseating the RAM board completely fixed my RAM problem on this computer. I did go ahead and order the extra RAM chips from eBay just so I'd have 16 of them on hand in case any of these do fail in the future. They're not the same RAM chips used on any of my other computers like my 286 or even the Tandy 1000. Running the video test here, we'll go through several different test patterns here. Of course I have it on a monochrome monitor so we're not going to be able to see any kind of the color. But if we go through these, we're looking at 280 by 192 resolution images here. Now we're looking at 560 by 192, so this is the same as the Apple II kind of double high-res mode. Here we are at a color bar test. Very nice, not something you would ever see on an Apple II. This color bar test on the Apple III shows that it can actually generate true actual colors and not the fake color that the Apple II uses. Apple II relies simply on artifacting using high-res lines basically at different positions that the NTSC monitors will interpret as color. And here we are with another test screen showing the computer can have different color fonts and backgrounds. Fantastic. Apple II emulation mode, basically return to boot the actual floppy or escape for configuration options. So here's some of the options you have here. AppleSoft or Integer Basic, 2 different communication modes, closed Apple return to save the configuration, escaped for defaults, and if I hit escape, then we are AppleSoft Basic, and we're going to hit enter to boot. Sounds very familiar, like an Apple II. Here's a classic game I'm going to try. Yeah, Oregon Trail. This requires at least 64K to operate. Pretty hilarious because obviously this computer has a lot more than 64K. If you think about what was out at the time this emulation disk was created, it was more likely to be an Apple II Plus with 48K of RAM, or maybe just even the regular Apple II with 32 or 48K. So games that are newer and require more RAM just don't work. Well, I hope you enjoyed my look at the Apple III. I'll have lots more videos in the future dealing with this computer as I kind of figure out more and do more stuff with it. But I'm glad I got it working. Next up, I have to replace all the capacitors on the power supply, and get some more software for it. If you found any of this interesting, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. You can definitely subscribe for more videos, and put any questions or comments you have down below in the comment section. Thanks for watching. Bye.